What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the bench for another episode of our PBY Catalina here for the Pearl Harbor group build. I'm going to go ahead and move today on to decals. Last episode I overcoated everything with Pledge and we are ready to go ahead and get these decals applied and put on a nice glossy finish. So this is going to be fun. Now we are actually going to be using these Wolfpack decals and I'm going to be specifically using the ones for this version right down here with red and white striped tail. It's going to be 1942 at Pearl Harbor. So it's after the attack, but it's still within the same time frame. So we're good to go with that. I'm excited. Let's go ahead and just see how these work. Now the aircraft itself looks great. I love the gloss coat on there. Everything is protected and sealed behind that layer of Pledge Future. So we are good to go with that. The pre-shade is showing through nicely on certain areas. And I'm assuming once I put down some weathering coats, it's going to really make those different color variations pop. That's what I'm going for. In terms of everything else though, guys, we do need to go ahead and come in and paint this little black, I think it's like a wing walk or something, or some sort of demarcation right here on the top of the wing that we forgot to do. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that with some flat black. But other than that, we just have to go ahead and get those decals put on and then gloss coat the entire aircraft to seal those decals in. So let's go ahead and jump into our first time lapse, get this all squared away, get that area painted up, get the decals on and hit it with a nice top coat of gloss. Let's do it. Let's see what we can do. All right, while that aircraft is off camera drying with that gloss coat on, let's turn our attention over to the base. Now I actually have this right here. This is a Foamular sheet of installation foam given over to me by my buddy Joe over at Mad Genius. We're gonna go ahead and just cut this off the larger piece, and we're gonna work with the smaller square. What I wanna go ahead and do is shave this down to an appropriate size and then mark out kind of where the aircraft's gonna go, and then get a battery pack installation on the bottom and get a switch installed and just figure out how this is all gonna go together. Now to cut this foam, you could use a bunch of different things like a wire cutter and whatnot, but I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the tried and true ruler and box cutter. This is actually made by the same company who makes my circle hole cutter. I've got a brand new blade in here, so I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of very light passes with a super sharp blade, progressively cut our way down through the foam. It's pretty thick stuff, so I'm going to take a couple of passes. We're going to see how it goes. So far it's cutting really well, so I'm happy with that. Maybe one more should actually separate the two pieces just a little bit more. And there we go. Okay, so we have two pieces of foam cut pretty decently. Let's go ahead and move over to the other side. Let's go ahead and clean up the other edge there just to trim it down and square up this piece just a little bit. We'll probably end up taking this down significantly. I don't want a giant footprint here. I want something a little bit smaller and a little bit more manageable. So I'm gonna go ahead and just trim off this rough cut edge right here, and then we can go ahead and move on from there, get the rest of it cut. I wanna go ahead and make this a double stacked base. So the bottom section will be where the battery and the switch and all the wires will be held, and then the top part will be glued on top of that, and that'll be where the aircraft sits with the water base. Not sure how that's going to go, but I want to cut enough room for a battery pack to fit up inside, along with a channel for the switch. I want to figure out where the switch is going to go and just continue on from there and see what we can do. I think I'm also going to go ahead and use some Elmer's school glue to go ahead and glue the two pieces together. So let's go ahead and jump back into that time lapse, cut up the rest of the foam, cut up in the area for the battery pack, get that wire switch ready to go, glue it down and see how it goes. With the base all glued together, the weights are on, sitting off camera here. We're going to go ahead and move over to the aircraft, which has been sitting for a little while, and this is ready for some weathering. Now to go ahead and do the weathering, I'm going to use some AK paneliners, and I'm going to use it more as a sludge wash, just overcoating the entire aircraft with the single color. Luckily, this was actually one for blue and gray, and what we have here on the aircraft is blue and gray. So let's go ahead and push on to the last time lapse of the day, guys. We're going to get that sludge wash applied. Then I want to come in, I want to go ahead and take it off and clean it up so we have just a little bit of hints here and there. Then we'll seal it up with a nice custom mixture of Winsor Newton matte varnish and a little bit of Future. Fingers crossed, this works out. Let's do it. Alright everybody, so we are back and the aircraft is more or less weathered. We've got the AK paneliners nicely applied and removed. We've overcoated everything with a flat coat and I think this works really well. The pre-shade is showing through nicely, so I'm happy with that. I like how this has turned out so far. So now all we have to do is come back, do a little bit more weathering here. A couple of areas around needs a bit of doctoring, move all the masks on the clear part, and then we'll be able to install it to the base, at least in theory. The bottom of the aircraft needs a little bit of work, but I think you're not really going to see much of it because it's going to be hidden, so that's not really that troublesome. I think the top is far more important, and I like how that looks, so I'm pretty happy with it. Now, speaking of the base, however, that is another story. I really don't know what I'm doing with this, but as you can see, we have our pole right there mounted for the aircraft to be placed onto that. It's not glued in, it's just friction fit up inside the foam, and you can see where the wires will end up coming out, and that's going to be right there where all the wires will be soldered. We also have a side section cut out for the switch. We have a little channel there for the switch to fit in, and as you can see, it's pretty generous, lots of room in there, so we can just go ahead and string those wires through and then attach the switch to the outside. The battery pack is a pretty snug fit, but that was by design. I don't want it to be just bouncing around in there. It's going to be nice and snug. The switch itself is going to go somewhere right around here, and then we'll be able to just string the wires out and go ahead and solder them all up. So the aircraft wire will come down through the pipe, and then the rest of it will be hooked to the switch. We can make all our connections up inside right there, and we are good to go. The switch, of course, is a little bit loose on the inside right there, but I have a little bit of an idea. I tried to make this as snug as I possibly could, but I realized the more you move that switch, the more it's going to open up that opening. So instead, I have an idea of maybe cleaning up the edges and going ahead and encasing it in a very thin sheet of balsa wood. That might actually give us a nice finished look, and then we can mount this switch to the balsa wood itself using this little thumb screw up on top, and then when we put that balsa wood up on the side, it'll just fit right up inside the opening and the switch can be wired up and no problem. Well, at least that's my idea. Who knows if it's going to work, but that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. Now, worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, I can always just use one of my switchable battery packs that I have. Uses the same 3 volts, so that shouldn't be a problem. Flip it upside down, turn it on, should be good, but I really don't want to do that. I want to stick with the exterior switch if I can. Now for the airplane itself, I'm going to go ahead and eventually mount it to the base using this little rod right here. The wires will be put down through that into the base, of course, where all be soldered up. The top will be, I'm hoping, water. And then we'll have the propeller spinning and it'll look like it's just lifting off the water just ever so slightly. So I'm going to go ahead and get this a little bit of a nose up stance. And I think we can go ahead and achieve that with what we have going. Now I had thought about going ahead and placing this so it's all nicely squared up on the edges, but I think it's far more visually interesting to have it slightly canted off to the side. So this way it's going at an angle and we have enough room for the water. I think it's going to look pretty good. Well, assuming I can get the water to look right. Now, not ever having worked with this foam before, I was not sure exactly what to use as an adhesive, or of course as a sealer. Now this here, Elmer's school glue, is super non-toxic. It doesn't do any sort of damage to the foam, so that I used to go ahead and glue the 2 pieces together, and it's actually held up quite nicely. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go ahead and make sure this is sealed before we put the resin down, before we do any painting, before anything like that happens, because this will be eaten by anything caustic. Like contact cement will eat right through this. Super glue, any sort of basic cement will just completely destroy the piece. Now luckily I have enough of these scraps kind of laying around. I can use those and play around with the idea of maybe priming it so I don't ruin the base. Figure out what actually works well with that. I've heard Plastidip works excellently for sealing foam, so I might go out to Home Depot and pick up a little bit of that. But other than that, well, I think we are moving towards a good idea here. So lots more to do, but I think we're going to end up figuring it out. And once we get that base all finished up, we can mount the aircraft to the top of that, add in our water effects, add in our wakes, and we should be pretty much done. Of course, the aircraft does need a little bit more work. For example, I do have to come in and add a little bit more weathering around the engines and the exhaust. I want to go ahead and add in some streaks coming off of these exhaust ports right here. And to do that, I'm probably just going to go ahead and use some AIM weathering powder. I've got some grimy black or maybe some dark gray. Just go ahead and give it a little bit more interest right there and then seal it off with a flat coat so it doesn't go anywhere. Also, of course, I do have to remove all of the clear masking, all this area right here so that we can see the inside. We can see how that looks. And then maybe add in some aerials from the tail down to the wing. But other than that, the main issue now is, of course, the base. And I got to do a lot more research to figure out what I'm going to do with it, how to seal it, how to go ahead and make that water look okay. I've got some resin I can use, but I can also use some silicone clear caulking. That also works well too. So there's lots of different options I can do. I got to figure it out though. So I'm going to do a little bit of test work off camera, kind of figure out what direction I'm taking with that. And then, well, we'll come back next episode and I'm hoping to finish off the aircraft 100%, get on this base, and maybe if I'm lucky, get the base finished off in a single episode. If not, I might take 2 more. I don't really know for sure, but we're going to go ahead and try to wrap this up as quickly as possible because I've got some other projects I do want to go ahead and work on, and I want to finish off this one before I start on anything else. So until our next episode, everybody, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. Big shout out to Joe for giving me his Foamular pink sheets, as well as some other diorama material. Thanks so much, buddy. That's going to help out immensely. And we'll see you back here on the next episode of Ben Builds for the Pearl Harbor Group Build and episode 11. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you soon.